Yesterday I posted a review of the Noodler Ink Boston Safety Pen, and I'm still very happy with it. This morning I uncapped it and very carefully pushed up the nib and did everything I was supposed to do to make sure I wouldn't get that little drop of ink flying out. And the nib is a nice semi-flex, just enough of a flex to prove you're using a fountain pen. And I thought I would show you sort of how it works. I can almost take this, not this pen completely apart, but I can show you with a diagram. I have the pen that it was based on is a Moore safety pen, and this one is a demonstrator model which shows a cutaway as to how the inner cap works on the pen. So when it's shut, essentially what you have here is an elaborate bottle of ink. There's a ink obviously inside of that barrel, and the nib is submerged in the ink when it isn't being used, and that allows it to never dry out, which is the problem with using permanent inks, is that they can dry and clog the pen. So Moore and Waterman, among other people, created something called safety pens, and they keep the nib completely immersed in ink and therefore will not dry out when the pen is not in use. It requires, though, that you have the pen full of ink when you're using it, or when you're not using it, you just make sure it has enough ink to submerge the nib, which is hard to do when you can't see, when your X-ray vision glasses aren't on. You can't see that. But anyway, blah blah blah. Here's what it looks like. So you unscrew it, you push the nib up to write with it. You don't push it up like that, you hold it upright, otherwise if you did this ink would pour out of it. So it's made up of various parts. You've got this rod that's connected to the nib, and that's, if I could take the pen more apart if I wanted to, but I don't really want to do that right now because it involves more work than I want to deal with right now. But the working part, the only part that would have to ever be replaced, is a little piece of cork that exists back here, a little plug of cork with a hole through it, and that will keep both the ink in, and it'll allow you to move this thing back up and down, and it'll lock it. It's tight enough that it'll lock it in place. The cork does need to be replaced from time to time on these old pens. The new version that Nathan Tardif makes with Noodler's pens has the same kind of a thing happening to it. I'm not going to take this one apart, but come on, unscrew. Okay, don't unscrew. But there is a little packing, some sort of silicone magic plastic material that's keeping it sealed, as well as allowing that rod to go back and forth. So I know that in the back of your mind you're thinking, well, what's to keep me from pushing this forward and ramming the point of the nib into the top of the cap? And the thing that keeps that from happening, I don't know if you can see this here, there's a little pin that sticks down and will keep the point. The point will not be able to be moved anywhere further because that little pin is holding it down. And there is such a pin in the cap here. Does it come apart? I haven't even tried that out to show you. I didn't have to maybe show you the demonstrator if this unscrews. Maybe it doesn't. Oh well. Anyway, there is a pin up here that you see there, and that keeps the nib from accidentally being shoved forward. So this stopper keeps the ink in the barrel no matter how much you shake it and move it around, and the pin keeps the nib from smushing against the top. So it's essentially the same thing here. It's a very sound design, even though, you know, this is not going to win any design awards for its beauty. It's rather clunky. The operation of making it work is kind of clumsy. You have to use two hands to, you know, carefully to arrange it all and make it go. But it seems to be the only system that will work with permanent ink in a fountain pen. Any other, you know, this sort of cap that seals it makes it airtight, but even the little tiny bit of air that's in that cap is going to dry the ink out. In any fountain pen, it'll dry the ink out, but when you're using permanent inks, you're not only drying it out, but you're sealing your fate, its doom, because the shellac that's in the ink, or whatever the waterproof agent is going to dry on the mechanisms, on the nib, and on the channel going through the feed. Everything's going to dry and clog, and then you'll have to completely take the pen apart and use all sorts of nasty solvents that are probably going to give you cancer, or cute little bunnies cancer, or whatever. You just want to make sure that you don't do that. So you do have to deal with a little bit of contraptionness in a pen that you're going to be using that kind of ink with. And the reason I'm very, very careful about, you know, very slowly moving this back, which isn't easy to do, because you have to sort of, if I moved it back quickly, often, I didn't do it there, well, I must not have it filled up enough, but if I pull this back quickly and it's full of ink, a little drop of ink will smoosh out. The same thing if I push it forward quickly, there's ink that's in front of the nib that might drip out. So you just have to slide this up and down carefully and slowly, and have it aimed away from your drawing that you've spent so much time on. I may attempt to put a more flexible nib, a nib, let's say, from this pen that's clearly more flexible than this one, in it, but it is not easy to do. Shall I just try it with this nib? Shall I just do it right now? Why not? I'll do it in front of you all. I don't know if this nib fits. It looks like it might fit, so I'm going to try it out, just see if it works. So I wouldn't recommend you do this at home, because it does involve experience and the willingness to break something, and I seem to be willing to break things these days. So I'm very gently rocking this out. Come on. Now, Nathan, the designer of this pen, manufacturer of this pen, seems to think that this is easy to do, and it probably is. Maybe there's a way that's easier than what I'm doing. There is a way to pull this pen out from behind, but you still have to, there's a little collar you have to deal with, which I don't want to deal with right now. I did this operation successfully at the pen show a couple weeks ago, where a man bought one of these pens and he wanted a gold nib in it, and he found a gold Waterman number 2 nib in my pens that I was selling, and he liked it, and I said, okay, well, I can try to do it. I can't guarantee that it's going to work, but I'll try it. And it worked perfectly. And then he had another one, he wanted me to put a different pen nib in, and it did not work. And so it is, there's going to be a lot of trial and error that someone's going to have to do. So the first thing I do when I look at these two nibs is they are roughly the same length. So I should know how far this is going to stick out. If it sticks out too far, it's going to be a problem. This is a nib I got yesterday on a pen, and it skips a little bit on the pen that it came in, and I think it might be I need to refit the feed. The other thing is the back of these pens. This, I don't know if you can tell, I think you can sort of here by looking at the reflection there. This is thicker because it's steel. This is thinner because it's gold. So this may feel loose when it's in here. The other thing that's different is the arc of the covenant. The arc of the, no, see, this is not fitting. The curve of the back of the pen is slightly different. You know, this one, you know, may be like that, whereas the gold nib is more rounded. I guess you're not seeing what I'm doing here. So I'm going to see, do I have kind of a bunch of other nibs here I can try out? No. I'm going to try that one. Give me a Waterman number 2. What is this pen? This is a Waterman number 2. Very flexible Waterman number 2. Does this fit? This does fit. Now this pen is extremely flexible, but this ink that's in it, the carbon ink, is a little bit thicker than regular ink, so it may not keep up with me. This nib is a little scratchy. I just dipped it in the ink to get it started. This is a little scratchy, and I would not like using this in this pen. So let's try another one. This is a wall pen number 3. This is a nib that is the same size as the nib I tried from the wall, so I'm just going to assume it's not going to fit. Give me another Waterman number 2. Ah, here's a dip pen nib. Victorian dip pen nib. We don't want that. Is this a Waterman 2? This is not, but does it fit? It does fit. Ooh, nice. Let's see if this works. What kind of nib is this? Oh, this is a Monroe. Monroe pens, I have one in my collection, and it's a beautiful pen. It's every bit as nice as a Wall Eversharp Deco banded pen, except it's even more deco. Maybe I'll show it to you one day. And it's blue and bronze in color. More. Well, here's a more nib. Is it broken? More nibs are often broken. It should, you know, I mean, a more nib would be sort of correct because this is a copy of a more pen. So, more nibs, though, are quite often. Okay, this one seems to fit. So I'm going to just leave this one in here for a while and see how well it writes. This is a Waterman number 2. Okay, this is a Waterman nib from the 30s or 40s. So it might be slightly smaller than the Watermans of the teens and 20s. But as you can see, there's more flexibility seen here than there was in the original Noodler's nib. And part of my desire for getting this pen was to see if I can put a slightly more flexible nib in it. So I'll try this one for a while. I'll let you know how it works. Again, I'm very happy with the Noodler nib that it came with, but being that this is steel, it may not have the resilience and the longevity of a gold nib. And so I'll keep trying this one, see how this works. Come on, now get back. Good. Seal you up. Good. And maybe I'll try a more nib in it, actually, to see if it'd be nice if I could find a good more that isn't broken, that I can put in the pen that is the inspiration for this. Sorry for not being able to finish my sentence. Oh, in a timely manner. There were pens called the Boston Safety Pen too, which would be another perfectly good pen for this nib for this pen, because this is a Boston Safety Pen. So that might work. Okay, let's uncap it and try it again. Oops, not thinking. There's a little bit of skipping going on. This is not a bad nib. It's certainly more expressive than the Noodler's nib. It's a little broad. It's a little fatter than I would like. If I am going to use this pen to do any drawing, it's going to be for doing drawings that I'm going to use ink wash on top of, so it won't bleed watercolor or ink wash on top of. And right now, the way I'm drawing and the way I think I want to draw is to use very, very fine lines. So what I might do is put a really, really fine, almost invisible line when it's quiet, when it's not, no pressure is applied. I may find a nib that's maybe a Waterman Accountant nib would be what I want, which is almost invisibly fine when you don't press down, and it has a little tiny bit of pressure when you do. That way I can use the pen to map out my watercolor drawing almost in the same way that I would be mapping out drawing with pencil that I would later erase. Now, that's how I would do it. Now, there are other people that use ink, pens, and watercolor on the same drawing, and they are much more deliberate about their lines they make. In fact, they might even start with pencil, draw the thing in pencil, and then use the pen to sort of fill in more permanent kind of line work, and then they add the color. And that's generally not how I do it, but I may learn to do it that way. Right now my mind excuse me, rejects that idea on grounds that I just can't, I don't think about it in that way, I guess. It competes too much in my mind, the ink and the color of watercolor. I guess when I think of watercolor, I think of being a purist, meaning the watercolor is really the important part, and if there is any inking, it's just very, very subtle. It would almost, I would like the inking to look almost as if I used a brush. I want it to fit, to look like it's almost a very thin brush. And I suppose I could get a very thin watercolor brush and do it that way. Except watercolor being watercolor, it would fade and I'd get the black lines I just put down, they would disappear and turn my colors grayer, whereas that won't happen with this. So maybe that's why black line work is used. See, I'm learning things. By saying them out loud to an audience, I'm learning what I never thought about before. But I don't think maybe sometimes I would do a drawing. I make maps for people sometimes, and sometimes people want me to make them in color. So let's say if someone worked in a factory, I would draw the factory out like this. Here's the smoke belching out of the smokestacks. Here's the front door into which all of the child laborers go. Here's the back door where the trains pick up the product that the factory makes to deliver to people that don't need it. So this is the Acme Widget Company. Child laborers belching carcinogenic smoke and the products that are not needed. Meanwhile, the rainforest over here is being cut down by other people to truck the items over to the factory to be made into these things. So now you've got the entire system. If this were on a map and my customer might want me to add color to it, I could do that. But because this is going to be printed very, very small and it's going to be part of some other larger, more complicated thing, having an outline of pen and ink. And there's also going to be, on the map, there's going to be things written in ink. Words like, whatever it is. The Acme, factory, widget factory will be in ink. Roads will be in ink. Road labels will be in ink. So that's already a multimedia, mixed media rather, project. So color is added on maps. Maps originally were printed and engraved. In old atlases, they were engraved, and then color was added on top so that you could see which country was Germany and which country was France, for example. And so in this case, doing line work in ink that's detailed, up on top of which would be added a color, which is, where's something that has color? Okay, this has kind of pink in it. Let's say this factory was, see, this is what happens. This is what happens when it's regular ink, fountain pen ink. It bleeds. So with this ink that's in this pen that I just used, it shouldn't bleed. I don't know if it's completely dried yet. It looks like it hasn't completely dried, but it's dried enough. So here's some areas where it hasn't dried. Yeah, some of the areas you see haven't dried, but most of them have. So this is what's good about a pen like this, and ink like that, and use like maps. So that's where I would use deliberate line work representing the outline of something. If I'm drawing an actual, if I'm out with urban sketchers and I'm drawing, we were drawing Trinity Church the other day. If I was drawing Trinity Church, I might use the pen to very gently map out the shape of the church before mixing my colors up and adding the colors. Or I might, after the color is added, I might go back in and then add just little highlights of really dark shadow, or maybe a few very tight little details here and there. But normally, if I ever learn how to do watercolor, the color is going to be the front and center, where in this drawing right here, black and white is the front and center, and color plays second fiddle. Here, color plays first fiddle, colors play first fiddle, and the black line work is a supporting actor. Oh, God, my brain hurts. Does your brain hurt? It should. Trying to understand what I'm saying is not easy, because I don't even understand it. So, put that in your pipe and smoke it. See you later.